All right. Hi, everybody. Welcome to our March edition, Q1 Starting Solids 101. I'm Michael, co-founder of Lalo. As always, joined by Kim Grenowitzki of Solid Starts. We're going to take a couple minutes before we get started. We're going to let people trickle in. And give me one second. I'm going to launch some polls. But in the meantime, if you can go down to the chat, make sure it says that you're posting to everyone, not just hosts and panelists, but messaging to everyone. And tell us where you're joining from. It's always fun to see where people are joining us from.
Oops.
All right. What do we got? Wisconsin, Denver, Scottsdale, Austin, Toronto, Orange County, British Columbia, Colorado, Milwaukee, Vancouver, Chicago, Maryland, Illinois, New York City, Canada, Connecticut, Austin, Texas, Toronto, Reading, Connecticut, back-to-back Connecticut. Three Connecticut back-to-back. Maybe you guys are all together. Colorado, our furthest person yet, New Zealand. Kansas. All right. It's always so fun to see how far and wide you guys joined from. Lots of Canada in the house today. These webinars are tariff free. So I'm going to also launch a little poll. It's always fun to see where people are in their journey, how old your little ones are. So we're going to give a couple more minutes for people to trickle in. Oh, we got some Tokyo. We got Hamburg, Germany, Seattle, Washington. All right. Lots of international folks. All right. So most of you in that 0 to 6 month window, which is as expected. Some of you expecting on the way. So congratulations to you guys. Hope you are all doing great and getting ready. And then last poll, have you started solids yet? So curious, like where you guys are at in your journey, how confident you're feeling. So Kim and I always have a great conversation. The whole purpose of today's chat is to make you feel a little less anxious, a lot more confident. It's not going to be super didactic. We're not going to be super educational here. We're going to have a fun conversation. And the goal is to bring that anxiety level down just a little bit. Before we get into it, and just so you guys can just see the results here, it's a little split. Some of you started, some have not, some have dipped their toe in the water. But we're going to get into the 101 of starting solids. So, but before we do, we always have a giveaway as part of these webinars. So make sure you stay to the end. You have to be here to win it. We always give away our First Bites Full kit. So our non-toxic feeding essential kit for starting solids and beyond. And then Solid Starts membership. So you guys can get access to all the brilliant wisdom around feeding your littles from Solid Starts. As I mentioned, I'm Michael, co-founder of Lalo. I'm always joined by Kim, who is many things, including pediatric OT, a feeding specialist, and a mom. So you got a mixture here of practical parent. I got 2 kids. Kim's practical parent, but also with a side of expert. And we really want to cover the basics here. Last housekeeping items, and then we're going to get to the questions. First and foremost, we don't give any medical advice. Anything medical, please bring to your doctor. Some of you, I'm sure, have specific scenarios. If it is verging on the medical, hold that question for your doctor. If you have other questions, though, please put them in the Q&A at the bottom. There's a little speech bubble with a question mark. Click that, put the questions there that you have. We always save time at the end to get to Q&A, and that's the place to do it. We will never see the chat during our session. So without further ado, Kim, thank you again for doing these with me. They're always so fun. I want to just start off with, what does it mean to start solids? And there's a lot of talk about different methods of starting solids. If you can just like talk to us about what it means to start solids and kind of how do you do it? How do you even know when your kid is ready?
Yeah, absolutely. So I love that there's a lot of people in here who haven't even started yet, because this is a great thing to talk about. We get really stuck in the muck when it comes to starting solids, because it just feels like another thing that we have to add to our to-do list. It's going to be messy. You don't really know what's going to happen, and it just kind of blows up as this big moment of anxiety. When in reality, what are we trying to do? We're trying to teach our babies, to start eating the kind of foods that we eat as a family. So the whole purpose is to bring them into the family meal. And yes, of course, that's going to be a stepwise thing. It doesn't have to be immediate, but the goal in general is to help them move from breast and bottle feeding to table food. Now, yes, there are nutritional components to that. We'll kind of sprinkle some of that in here today, but the biggest thing they have to figure out is how to sit at the table with you and your family and to feed themselves and to chew. So there's a lot of learning that's going on here. In the same way that your baby is learning how to reach and to pick things up and to roll over and to push up and crawl and all those things, the table is exactly the same thing. It's just another milestone of learning skills that they're going to use for the rest of their life. When it comes to readiness and knowing when your baby's ready, you have probably heard so many different things out there. Your pediatrician may have given you a handout. You may have gone into your 4-month pediatrician appointment and they've said, okay, time to start solids. But it's really hard to pinpoint a time that it's exactly necessary for any baby to start solids. So we did a big deep dive on the literature to find out what it is that we know and why should we start at any certain time. And from a nutritional standpoint, there's no research to tell us that starting solids at 4 months or 5 months is any better than starting at 6. What we know that starting somewhere around 6 months is when their nutritional needs begin to change. So when it comes to nutrition, around 6 months is completely fine. And when we're thinking about those goals of bringing your child into the family meal and having them learn to feed themselves and to chew, we want to look at the skills they need as a baby, like their developmental skills, to be able to do that task. Like, we don't expect our newborn to be able to like pull up and stand because their body's not ready for it yet. So what are the skills that they need to be ready for this next challenge of learning to eat? So
Yeah.
those skills are the ability to sit with some support, and that does not mean to like you have to be able to put them on the floor and walk away and do the dishes and they don't topple over. It definitely doesn't have to be like that. But you put them in their high chair, you put them on your lap, and they can hold their body up, they hold their head and neck up, and they can sit there for 10 or 15 minutes. The second thing is we want them to be able to pick something up and bring it to their mouth when they're sitting. So babies that are a little bit weak, you maybe give them a toy and they start to try to bring it to their mouth and they like completely topple over because they haven't figured out how to like hold their tummy muscles and use their arms yet. But a baby around 6 months typically can sit nice and tall. If you give them something, they can hold on to it, they can play with it, bring it to their mouth, no problem. And then the third thing we look for is interest. We want them to actually care about what's happening. So when you bring a 4-month-old to the table or a 3-month-old, they typically kind of like fall asleep. They like maybe look around for a little while. They might get fussy. They might want to nurse or have a bottle, but they're not really engaged in the meal. You bring your 6-month-old to the table, they're like, what is going on? What are you doing? What is that? I want that thing. They're really curious about the stuff happening at the table, which is telling us that their brain is ready to learn about it too. So sitting with a little bit of help, bringing the hand to the mouth, interest in food, and the nutritional stuff kind of starts shifting around 6 months. Most babies show these signs somewhere around 6 months. Some a little earlier, some a little later, but around 6 months is the general answer.
Yeah. And so obviously, you got to read, like you said, you got to read your baby skills or your baby's cues. Every baby is different, and you have to use a lot of your gut. But one thing that like seems so daunting is when you're on the internet, there's a million people telling you how to do it. Like you could do baby-led weaning, that's like the big phrase, or you could do purees, or there's probably a new crazy phrase.
Yeah.
But and it feels like there's police watching you to make sure you do it right.
Mhm.
Two-part question. One is like, is there a right or wrong way? And based on that, like, and what is like, what's your perspective or the Solid Starts perspective on how to start? Is there a right methodology or wrong methodology? And
Totally. So I'm probably going to rock everybody's world here because there is a right way to do it. And it's the way that makes you feel safe and comfortable. Like that is the answer to everything in parenting. Of course, there are safety things we want to consider. There are developmental things we want to consider, but at the end of the day, it's about you feeling safe and comfortable. Um, you, like Michael was saying, you will hear on the internet, there's baby-led weaning, there's purees, there's combo method. These phrases are, they're trends, they are what they are. But at the end of the day, the thing that, from a developmental perspective and a feeding therapy perspective, the thing that is the most important to me is that we are responsive to our babies. So you can call this responsive feeding if we want to actually use a term for it, but we want to let your baby take the lead in the same way that we let a baby take the lead with toys or with other things we're interacting, we want to do the exact same thing with the meal. So if you are feeling like you would prefer to start with pureed foods and mashes, great. You can put those purees and mashes on the tray and let them get their hands in there and get dirty and get their hands to their mouth. You can preload a spoon and hand it over and let them practice bringing that spoon to their mouth. You can hold the spoon out for them and wait for them to open their mouth and lean in and engage with the spoon. The goal is completely just to listen to what your baby is saying to you and respond. When it comes to being responsive, the easiest way to do that is to let them feed themselves. Now, it depends on whether you feel comfortable with that. And if you don't, that's why you would, hold the spoon out and let them lean in and just indicate that they're ready for it. So you can start with whatever kinds of foods that you want. Full disclosure, both of my girls started with exactly what we were eating for our dinner. I just gave them pieces that were appropriately sized and shaped for them. That's what worked for me. I've dedicated 15 years of my life to this work. I don't feel nervous about it. That's worked for me, right? And for us, it was easier. We were already cooking dinner every night. I could just pull things off of my plate and hand them over. It's absolutely completely fine to do that if that feels good to you. If you would rather start with a little bit more of a balanced approach where you're making some foods for baby and then you're slowly transitioning into serving foods that your family eats, also completely fine. So in my goal of life here, it is just to get away from this dogma of like this camp of people versus this camp of people. The goal is to let baby feed themselves, let baby take the lead. It's not about the kind of food, it's about the experience of them being in charge of this, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I like that advice. Like the best way is your way. And so, you know, speaking of your way, like everybody's schedules are different, working situations, daycare situations, you name it, it's all different. And so schedules can also become challenging as you're integrating this new habit or this new routine into your life with your little one. Is there any, like, as you're in this early stages of starting solids, is there a specific schedule to follow or like general guidelines that you recommend as you're getting started?
Yeah, so it can feel like another chore of something you're supposed to add into your day. And our days are already really packed and challenging. The thing to keep in mind is that in the beginning, it's very much all just about exposure and practice. So your goal in the first few months, so we're talking like 6, 7, 8 months old, is to offer food once a day. If you skip a day, it's okay. If you guys just have a really cruddy schedule day where you're like running in and out and your toddler's in something and your older kid's somewhere else, skip that day. It's completely okay. If your baby's having a tough day, skip that day. Completely okay. The goal of those first few months is just to kind of get the hang of it. We tend to recommend to have you give a bottle or a breastfeed about 30 to 45 minutes before you show up to the table. And that might feel like, why would I do that? Then they're not going to be hungry. But we actually don't want to bring the baby to the table too hungry at first, because they don't have the skills to match the fact that they're feeling super hungry. So they end up getting frustrated. We want them to be a little bit full, but then come to the table and be interested and engaged. The food at that point is more of a toy to them. They're like, what is this thing? I have no idea what it is. I explore with my mouth. That's how I learn. They're not thinking they're eating. They're thinking that they're learning about this toy that's in front of them. So you bring them to the table 30 to 45 minutes after doing your bottle or breastfeed. They hang out at the table, full disclosure, maybe 5 or 10 minutes the first time. It's very rare, but there are some babies that just want to be there for a long time, but most have maybe 5-10 minutes in them, and then they want to be held, and it's completely okay. Just give a bottle or breastfeed after that and move on with your day. Around 9 months, the goal would be to try to get 2 exposures of food in each day. It doesn't have to be perfect. If you miss a day here and there, if they go to daycare during the week and you maybe don't feel comfortable with daycare offering food, maybe you do, breakfast. And then on the weekends, you try to get in 2 meals. You guys can make it work with your life. Around toddlerhood, right around that 11, 12-month milestone, we're trying to get in a breakfast and a lunch and a dinner. And again, as they get closer to a year, you're trying to give them a little bit more space in between their breast and bottle feeds and their table food so they actually can respond to their hunger. But I think one of the biggest mistakes that parents make is bring their babies to the table just too hungry in the beginning. And the baby's like, I'm hangry. I need something in my belly. I have no idea how to do this. I have no idea how to move this food around in my mouth. Even if it's puree from a spoon, you'll see tons of spitting at first, totally normal, not a problem. They just don't know what to do. And they're like, I'm hungry, I'm grumpy, get me out of here. In the same way that we all act when we're starving, right?
Yeah. Okay. We're about to get to the two hot topics every time. There's probably there's two real anxiety producing topics. One is choking and one is allergies. So let's start with choking, because I think over the course of doing these with you, Kim, I've learned so much. I'm definitely the parent in my family that is the anxious choking parent. When my kids were littler, and I was the one that was like on guard, if you will, until we started talking, and you brought me down to earth. So it'd be great if you could help everybody understand, like, A, what is choking, and B, how do you be prepared, or how prepared do you need to be the idea that your little one may choke?
So one of the reasons I think that we're so nervous about choking is that there's a confusion as to what choking really is. And the media also portrays choking as a leading cause of death when you look at the data, that actually is just simply not the case. So for anybody that is a big data nerd and you like to know the numbers, if you look at the number of infant and every single infant death and child death I wish could be preventable. I've worked in children's hospitals my entire career. I know how horrible those situations are. So I don't want to talk about these statistics and make it seem, downgrade the sadness of the situation. But I do think it's helpful for some people to know numbers. Less than 1% of deaths in babies under a year are from choking, and less than 0.5% are on food. So it's more likely that a child under the age of 1 will choke on non-food items than food. And it's still less than 1%. It is nowhere near the top leading causes of death. The reason that statistic gets thrown out there is because accidents is on that list and choking goes in that bucket. But choking is like one of the way lowest ones in that bucket. So it's not as common as we like to think it is, number one. And it's actually more common for toddlers and older kids to choke on food. And we don't have the data to support this, but my assumption and our team's assumption when looking at it is that toddlers are not as supervised and they're mobile. So they're like running around. All of the choking cases I ever saw in the hospital were kids that were running around with a marshmallow in their mouth. They're riding their bike and threw a grape in the air and tried to catch the grape in their mouth. They, fell backwards in their chair because they kicked their chair over, that kind of thing. So your risk in infancy is very low, number one. And number two, understanding what choking really is really important. So we all have 2 tubes in our throat, one for breathing and then one for swallowing. When we swallow, we have lots of lines of defense to protect that breathing tube from anything going in it. So we've got a flap of skin that covers it. There are all kinds of doors in your breathing tube that all close. So many things squeeze shut and pull the breathing tube out of the way because our bodies are made to protect us, right? Another protective mechanism that lots of times gets called choking is coughing. So if your baby, your child, your grandma is coughing, air is flowing. Air is going through that tube. That's how they cough. So if they're coughing, they're not choking. So tell yourself that right now 100 times. If they're coughing, they're not choking. If they're coughing, they're not choking. Because true choking is when an item gets stuck in that breathing tube, so air can't flow. It tends to have to be the right size, the right shape, the right consistency to like get lodged in there and stuck. There are situations where you can have a partial obstruction. So something might be in the breathing tube, but air can still flow. As long as they keep on coughing, that will push it out. That's the beauty of our body. Like coughing is our friend, coughing is helpful. The other thing that many times gets lodged in the bucket of choking is gagging. And gagging is another protective mechanism and another thing that our body does to get stuff out. So, for those of you that have little babies, because it sounds like a lot of you have younger than 6 month babies here, you have probably seen your baby gag on their hands and gag on toys. And even maybe if you're trying to do a breastfeeding to a bottle feeding transition, they may be gagging on bottles that you're trying. The gag is basically their brain's way of saying, wait, this isn't right, get it out. When we gag, the food tube contracts from the bottom up, pushing things out of the stomach and out the mouth. The tongue cups and kind of pushes everything out because the brain is saying, I don't want to swallow it. I don't want it. Get it out. At the same time, because our bodies are so incredible, your breathing tube closes because in the event you throw up, our body doesn't want the throw up to go into your breathing tube, right? So the gag is like, nope, this isn't good. I don't want this. Gag, I'm keeping it out. So until the time that you start solids, whether that's purees or finger foods, your baby's brain has never processed anything other than a single consistency, typically a single flavor. If you're breastfeeding, your milk will change based on what you're eating, but it not to the extent of like the flavors of the food we're giving them, right? And it just moves on their tongue the same exact way. Their tongue is basically an expert at this point in how to get milk from the outside world into their body. So you start with food and they're like, what the heck is this? Not safe. I need to get this out. I'm going to gag. You tend to see, like I had mentioned, a cupped tongue, an opened mouth. You tend to see like a forward posture because stuff is trying to come out. Gagging can be loud. Gagging can sometimes also be silent, or you just hear little like noises. But the one thing you'll always know is that in between gags, you will hear them take a breath. When they gag, the breathing tube closes, right? So they stop breathing for a second. But if they gag more than once, they are going to breathe in between. So it'll be like gag, gag. You'll hear them taking breaths in between. If they are truly choking, you will not hear breaths. You may hear some wheezing, like as air is trying to get around the obstruction, but you'll see pulling back because they're trying to get air in. Sometimes you'll see some tugging right here in their throat as they're trying to breathe. And in the worst case scenario, you'll see some color changes in their skin and their face as well. But remember, choking is very rare. It is most likely gagging you're seeing. Yes, gagging can be freaking ugly. I had one of my daughters was one of those really ugly gaggers that would like gag and puke, and the other one barely gagged. And both are normal, just kind of how their brain processes sensory information. But gagging can look really ugly. It can make you feel like, oh my gosh, something's wrong. But just know that's their brain being like, nope, got to get this out. Give them a minute and let it pass.
Love that. Yeah. Just to recap that, what I'm hearing, A, it's rare. B, the other signs, because we're on so high alert, remember, look for the breathing because it's probably they're gagging, coughing, doing something. They're not actually choking, but remember, it's so rare. I love that idea that like everything is so new. So new texture, new taste all at once can just cause gagging. And so that was
And for
something.
any of you that have older kids in the room that have a hard time with food, you may see them gag at the sight of food. Like I personally really hate uni. Like it's just a thing. My one thing I'm really picky about, seeing it will almost make me gag. Like I can feel my gag coming up because it's my brain being like, no, 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 get away from that.
Yeah, I love that. Okay. So the next scary topic, so to speak, is allergies, which should be taken seriously, and they're real, and because everything is new, you don't know. There's a mystery to it. What is the proper approach to starting allergens or introducing allergens? How do you go about it to kind of know if anything's at risk, and maybe if you touch on for those that have family history or know of others in the family, how do they approach it?
Yes. And so I always start this little disclaimer that I am not a pediatric allergist. And like Michael started, if you have more medically based questions, of course, you want to talk to your medical provider and they'll take in all your history and all that into consideration. But I am very lucky that I've worked with incredible pediatric allergists in my career. So I'm going to share with you what we've learned. But generally speaking, the science now tells us that you want to introduce the top allergens early in your solids journey. So there are 9 common allergens, and I'm going to get them all. Let's see: peanut, tree nut, dairy, egg, wheat, finned fish, shellfish, soy, and sesame. Woohoo! Got them all.
Nailed it.
The 9 common allergens, you want to do your best to try to introduce those early and then keep them in the rotation. Now, this is where things get a little crazy because the research actually says your best chance at preventing food allergy is to keep them in your baby and child's rotation 2 to 3 times a week up until age 5. Now, is that realistic for 99% of people? Absolutely not. Do your best. Try to keep these foods in rotation, especially if they're things that you eat often. There are 3 that are the most important to do in that 6 to 8 month window because the research is the strongest on those. And that is peanut, egg, and dairy. When you start introducing, you want to just start with a small amount and you want to only do 1 allergen at a time. So it's completely fine to give like strawberries with a little bit of thinned peanut butter, but you don't want to introduce peanut butter and yogurt at the same time because that would be dairy and peanut together. To rule out an allergy, you want to do at least 3 days of exposure. And again, it doesn't have to be only that one food, but you just limit it to that one allergen for 3 days. If your baby tolerates it without having any sort of reaction for those 3 days, then typically that is assumed tolerant, and you'll go on to whatever your next allergen is. After it's been ruled out, you can pair allergens together, but typically most parents are just like, it's just easier just to do them by themselves. Most babies can start those allergens around 6 months, around the same time that you're starting solids. We tend to recommend start solids first, get it going for a week or 2, and then get your allergens going because the allergens can feel a little stressful. Like get your sea legs first and then go to the allergens. There is one specific situation though, where babies actually, it's recommended that you start at 4 months. And that is for children who are high risk for allergy development. So there are 2 main factors that make a baby high risk for allergy development. The first is moderate to severe eczema. And the second is an existing allergy to another food. So they used to believe that a family history of allergy predisposed you to allergy, but now the research is showing that that's actually not a high risk factor. The bigger thing there is if you are a parent that has an allergy, you have to figure out how to safely give the allergens to your baby while, obviously not exposing yourself. So moderate to severe eczema or an existing allergy to another food, like, they have milk protein allergy already. Those 2 are the most important to start. If you have those 2, discuss with your provider, but the American Academy of Allergy, Asthma and Immunology, I think I got that right, recommends that those babies actually start at 4 months and they continue to expose those top 3 allergens from 4 to 6 months and then continue to expose the rest. Allergic reactions are typically 15 to 20 minutes after ingesting the food, and it can be almost immediate. There are some delayed allergic reactions, which is a different type of reaction called FPIEs, which is more rare. If you go to our website, we have photos of what allergic reactions look like on a variety of different skin tones, because a baby with darker skin is going to look a little different with hives than a baby with lighter skin. So great options for you guys to look at there, just so you're informed and know what you're looking for.
Awesome. Love that. Okay. Now we're getting to everybody else's questions, which are more important than mine. So just a reminder, if you have a question, please throw it in the Q&A down below, not the chat. We will get to as many as we can. We definitely don't have time for all of them. There's so many that have come in, but I'll try to combine similar questions so we can cover as many of your questions as possible. First question is from Rachel. She heard that babies shouldn't drink water until 1. Is that true?
Great question. So, generally speaking, we want to limit the amount of water babies have before around a year. And the reason behind that is we want to make sure they continue to drink breast milk and formula. This is going to sound wild, but babies can actually get dehydrated from drinking too much water because it flushes out their system of the nutrients that they need from breast milk and formula. So, what the recommendation from the AAP is to offer no more than 8 ounces a day once you start solids. Our gastroenterologist on our team tends to swing a little bit on the less than 8 ounces side. She recommends closer to 4. We tend to recommend offer about an ounce every time you offer solid foods. It helps with constipation. It helps clear their mouth out. And it's great to practice using a cup and a straw. And Lalo has great products for that. If you're interested, my toddlers and my preschoolers still uses them. They're Lalo cups. But the goal at this point is just to practice and to help with constipation. So we're limiting the amount. It's completely safe after 6 months for them to have small amounts every day. And then come around a year when you're starting to wean off breast milk and formula, that water drinking will start to become more important. And I'm sure we're going to get peppered with questions now about toddlers that won't drink water, but that's
As it goes, right? All right. Next question is about iron. If you have concern about your baby getting enough iron, but meat terrifies you, what can you do?
So first of all, if your baby's getting any formula at all, know that formula in the United States is fortified with iron. So they are getting more iron just based on the fact that they're getting formula. So hopefully that first lowers your stress level. Number two, know that it's not like they turn 6 months and their iron stores are gone. Their iron stores and processing have to do with a lot of things, not just the food you serve. It has to do with your pregnancy. It has to do with their birth history. It has to do with how their body processes and digests iron. So know that even if your baby ends up having on the lower end of iron, it's not your fault. It's nothing that you did. You could have fed every single perfect iron rich food in the world, and they still might come a little bit low on the iron side. So know that there's lots of factors that contribute to that, not just their food. Next, I would say talk to your provider, because many providers will do a prick test and do a screening to see what their iron levels are looking like. Earlier than the required 9 to 12 months. For example, I was very anemic during my second pregnancy and ended up having to get an iron infusion. And so we tested my littlest at 6 months just to see where she was at, out of curiosity's sake. Some providers will recommend doing a supplement right away. Others will say, oh, let's just wait and see. Now, when it comes to iron rich foods, yes, meats can be really scary. There are tons of non-meat iron rich food options that you can offer. Keep in mind that offering a lot of iron rich food, though, does lead to constipation. So keep that in the back of your head when you're thinking about foods that you're offering. But iron rich foods that are non-meat are things like beans are a great option, leafy green vegetables, lentils are great with iron, and all of these plant-based iron options. And you want to try to pair with vitamin C, which helps with absorption. So a little squirt of lemon can be great. Some bell pepper can be an awesome addition. And there's always infant fortified rice cereal if that's the direction you want to go.
Awesome. All right. We have about 5 more minutes, so we'll try to wrap it through them. What are your thoughts on adding spices, seasonings, oil, butter, condiments, salt, sugar, or should everything be plain?
Yeah, go for it. Go for it. You want to teach your babies that food tastes good, right? Especially when it comes to herbs and green sprinkles and things like that. Please introduce those. Most toddlers hate green, but if we think about it, they're out in the yard and they're eating grass and you're like, no, don't eat that. So how are they supposed to know that there's a difference between green food and green plants, right? Green is amazing. Lots of green early and often. Don't be afraid of salt and sugar. I know there's so much on the internet about how it's going to ruin their life. We have done deep dives on the literature on both of salt and sugar. A little salt and sugar here and there is completely safe. There's nothing that's wrong with it. If you want all the data, go to our website, look up salt, sugar. You can read the whole analysis of the data.
Awesome. Okay. This is just a quick clarification on something you said earlier. You mentioned about giving a feeding 30 to 45 minutes before going to the table. Is that a full feeding or partial feeding or?
In
And
the beginning, I would give a full feeding. The table is not about eating. Like, tell yourself that. I know it's really, really hard as adults, but them coming to the table is about learning. The only situation I'd recommend cutting back on the feed is if you have a baby that gags so much they puke a lot. So for most babies, give them a regular feed, let them be full, you're bringing them to the table to practice and learn. That's it.
awesome. All right, let me try to comb through and find some connected ones. So there's a question here from a couple people about they've tried to start introducing solids, but then they lose interest quickly, or they have a fit,
Mhm.
or there's something stops it from being quote unquote successful. Does that mean that they're not ready? Does that mean anything else? Like,
Well, I immediately shook my head there because it's very normal for babies not to just like have it click right away. It's like we would expect a kid to just get on a bike and ride it perfectly at first, right? There's a lot of components that they're learning about here. Could one of the things that's limiting them be they're not ready? Yeah, absolutely. They may need to work on their belly strength a little bit. It may be a lot for them to hold their head up and sit in the high chair and they're just dang tired. It's just too much to ask of them. That's completely normal. But most of the time, if we see a baby that's just not engaged, the first thing that we say is, how much are you modeling eating in front of them? So are you bringing them to the table while you eat so they can watch you pick up food and bring it to your mouth? While you're cooking in the kitchen, carry your baby on your hip, have them watch you stirring the soup, like get them engaged in the feeding activity outside of any expectations for them. So if your baby is starting to get frustrated, my first recommendation is take them out of the high chair and put them on your lap. Give them that extra connection, give them that extra support, and you just eat your food. Like, let your baby sit, and I know it's not easy to do this, but let the baby sit on your lap and eat, let them eat your food, or you eat your food. If they reach for the food on your plate, awesome. But just like let them sit there and exist with you while you eat your own food. Spitting, normal. That is nothing that means they don't like the food. That does not mean that they're not eating. Spitting comes before learning to move the food back. So if they're spitting, I give them a high five and I say, keep going. That's exactly what they're supposed to do. Throwing, very, very normal. They're learning about gravity. What happens when I do this? Totally normal. Having a fit, crying, that tells me like baby is too frustrated, too tired, too hungry. Something's up. We need to problem solve why they're feeling so uncomfortable. But most of the things that your baby is doing at the table, especially in those first 2 to 3 months of solids, completely normal, part of the process. They maybe just need a little bit of support from you.
awesome. Okay. Two more questions. Um, so the first question is a little specific, but if you have if you have like a dietary restriction in your household that includes an allergen, like let's say you're kosher, you don't eat shellfish,
Yep.
do you have to worry about that allergen, or because it's not part of your diet, you can just like move?
Yeah, this is such a good question. We had a long discussion with our allergist recently about it. Technically, if you're not planning on having your child eat that food, it's okay to not introduce it. The one thing you may want to consider is accidental exposure outside of your home. So things that, especially if you're at high risk for allergy, if you're not at high risk for allergy and you really don't think your child's going to be exposed to that food in any way, shape, or form, you can choose where your risk level lies there. I would be more uncomfortable about things like egg and dairy that are kind of like in a lot of things, especially at restaurants. But if they're really not going to be in foods that you're going to serve and it's not going to be something you expect your child to eat, it's not as important to introduce them. Just weigh the risk of accidental exposure.
All right. All right. That must be why my mom never gave me Oreos.
That Oreos are vegan.
Yeah, yeah, no eggs. I have
Yeah.
a friend whose daughter has an egg allergy, and that's her special treat. They is Oreos because it's
Yeah.
like the safest, cheat.
Yep.
Um, okay, but okay, last question, which we undoubtedly get every single time we have this webinar, so you already know what I'm going to ask. But what is the best first food to start with?
Uh, the best first food is something that's super meaningful to you. There is no right answer to this. It's something that's super meaningful to you. So again, Michael's heard this story a million times from me, but with both of my babies, we chose something that would be a really fun, emotional experience for us, because this is, again, it's a milestone. You're bringing your baby to the table. Like, this is something you want to remember, like have a story in your brain about it. So my first was my daughter that's almost 5 was born in the middle of the pandemic. Like things were just, you know, really out of whack. I didn't have the normal pregnancy experience. And the first time I felt her move, I was eating pineapple. My husband and I got married in Hawaii. My parents lived in Hawaii for a long time. It just felt right to have her first food be pineapple. So her first food was pineapple. And I will always like, I tear up a little bit thinking about it now because it was, you know, this moment of normalcy in the middle of the pandemic. My second daughter, we had just moved to Michigan from California, and I was very much missing my California roots. And it happened to be a Tuesday. And so we did like Taco Tuesday, and she had steak fajitas and bell pepper for her first food. You of course can get really in nitty gritty about thinking about the best nutritious option, there is no best first food. Like make that experience something that you want to tell your friends about, that you want to send the video to grandma and grandpa about. It's a fun day. Try to just think about something that's important to you and your food culture and your family and go with that.
Awesome. I love that. Okay. So that was awesome, as always. Hopefully, everybody here found it super helpful, brought down that anxiety just a little bit. But of course, if you need more support or are looking for more answers, Solid Starts is a great, great resource for that. Both their Instagram as well as their membership and all of their resources are unbeatable. So check them out if you're looking for more guidance. I will launch one more poll while I get the giveaway winner. It's always fun to see who's here and how many of you are already Lalo customers and how many of you are part of or maybe future Lalo customers. Before we announce the winner, actually, Kim, so Solid Starts is launching a book in April. In addition to their great resources, now it's going to come in book form. So want you to share more about that. We're actually going to be teaming up on a giveaway with them in April to celebrate the announcement. So keep an eye out for that with some other great partners. But if you could tell everybody about the book that's coming out from you guys.
We are just beside ourselves excited. Solid Starts for Babies will be launching April 1st. It's currently available for pre-order on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, books.com, wherever you would buy books. And for those of you that like to get into the nitty gritty, this book goes through all of the details of the research. It goes step by step to how to introduce allergens, what foods to do, the nutrition behind foods. It's unbelievably detailed. And then my favorite part of the book is that it goes into the depth of the why we do this. It's the why behind bringing your child into your family mealtime culture, and it's just a really beautiful book. We're so excited about it. So check it out. I'm hoping it's one of those things that lives on your shelf and you can like flip into it and be like, oh, I need a little info on introducing shellfish, and you can flip to that page and look it up. But we're really excited about it, and for our giveaway that's coming up soon.
Awesome. That was awesome. So, and did you say where you can buy it?
Anywhere online, online retailers right now. It's number one on Amazon right now, new release, which we're really excited about. But I just can't wait for it to be in the hands of parents out there. I think it's going to be so helpful.
Awesome. Okay. So the winner, there's a little raise hand icon down below. When I announce your name, please click that button so we know you're here, and Ariane on our team will be in touch with you. The winner of the giveaway is Jacqueline Palomino. So Jacqueline, if you're here, click there you are. Awesome. So Ariane will be in touch with you so you can claim your prize. Congratulations. We also have some very exciting news that we are going to be announcing in about a week and a half. So I encourage you to go to our Instagram at Lalo and follow us to be the first to know. It's very exciting. And I'm not over exaggerating, I promise. But yeah, thank you again for joining us. Kim, thank you for your wisdom as always. Good luck on your starting solids journey, everyone. Until next time.
Until next time. Bye, everybody.